Everyone, and happy Eclipse Day. I call the April 8th, 2024 school board meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. We are in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building at 12121 West North Avenue. I will call the roll. Mr. Morris? Here. Dr. Hoyk?
Here.
Ms. Willis?
Here.
Dr. Worley?
Here.
Ms. Heimer-Rollins?
Here.
Mr. Meyer is excused and Dr. Jessup Anchor is here. We have quorum and we will proceed through our meeting. We begin with a time for public comment. Members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue or issues raised. However, it is not the intent of public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter a debate with a member or members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items this evening. Is there any public comment in the room this evening? Seeing none, Jamie, is there any public comment online this evening?
No, we don't have any hands raised.
Thank you. We will close public comment at this point. We will move forward with the consent agenda. Are there any items in the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion and action? Seeing none, Ms. Heimer-Rollins?
It is recommended that the school board approve the consent agenda, and I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any board discussion or comments on the consent agenda this evening?
I just want to have one quick question, Dr. Finger. The Little League donation, is there any additional background there on that donation?
Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, I can give a little bit on that. It's for a shed for purpose of storing their equipment, and there's no cost to the district. We actually received the check today pending board approval to move ahead with the project.
Thank you. And a big thank you to the Little League program for making that sizable donation. Okay. Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Mr. Morse?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyk?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer-Rollins?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anchor is yes, and the consent agenda passes. We will then move into strategic goal 4, high quality staff. We have a presentation by Ms. Sarah Zelzowski, our chief of talent.
Good evening.
Good evening. Ms. Zelzowski, before I start, a couple of comments. One of the main goals and areas of focus of the board is certainly to determine our budget. So much of our budget is our human resources. We have invested quite a lot over the last several years on socio-emotional well-being of our students. Counselors have been added, teachers have been added to really focus in on helping students to the greatest degree possible be successful academically and socially within our schools. And so we'll be talking a little bit tonight about the staffing plan. I think, and I would ask the board to think about from a governance rule of how this aligns or doesn't align with our strategic plan, with our North Star, and with our goals that we have as a district, and sink our teeth into that. So let's ask you.
Thank you for the introduction. Our staffing plan represents a number of really essential items to our work in the school district. First, as you referenced, Dr. Jessup Anger, it is our financial plan. Our staffing costs, including salaries and benefits, represent about 83% of our budget in this organization. And the staffing plan tells us for that 83% of our budget, how many positions we need to have, what qualifications, certifications, and staff expertise we need for each of those positions in the organization. It also represents our academic plan. Our staff members are the ones who put our goals for students and their supports to reach those goals into action. This year's staffing plan in particular provides a foundational level support or establishes a foundational level of support for all of our schools by grade level. So for instance, when we are looking at our high schools, for instance, in the past, we had some different FTE allocations for social workers at our schools based on for a human resource reason. This year, for 2023-24, we made sure that we have 1.0 FTE for social workers at each of our high schools. Again, as a foundational level of staffing that Wauwatosa feels it's important to provide for schools at that level. This plan also provides an additional level of staffing where we see some additional needs for our schools. We started to see that this year in updates to allocations of academic specialists and education assistants. And this plan continues that work going forward. In particular, two of our elementary schools, Eisenhower and Underwood, have demonstrated some additional needs for student academic growth and behavioral support. So while we've used an elementary class size range for all of our elementary schools initially in our staffing assumptions and projections, looking at the needs of those two particular schools, we've offered some smaller grade level class sizes based on those particular needs. And we will continue to go ahead and hone in on the definition of what it looks like when a school needs additional supports, how we identify that and what that looks like. But that is one of the differences that you will see. We added some additional sections to both Eisenhower and Underwood since we first reviewed staffing allocations. And finally, but not least important, in the world of human resources, the staffing plans represent our hiring plan, exactly who we need to hire and put in place between now and the start of the 2024-25 school year. You may have seen that we've already begun advertising for vacancies on WeCan, the state's universal school website. And we've also filled some vacancies through attrition. We knew that overall for next school year, we would experience a reduction in FTE or full-time equivalents. And so we filled a number of positions before advertising on WeCan through an internal movement process. And now we've completed that and are, again, have vacancies posted externally for candidates. We will continue to monitor enrollments and potential changes in staffing needs from now through the start of the school year. And I'll get more into a little bit about what those steps coming up look like. I'd also like to note that attached to the proposals or linked to the proposals for tonight's meeting, community members, families can go ahead and click on the links for our teacher staffing plan proposed, as well as our educational and operational staffing plan. And you'll see a framework for that, just like we've advertised on our website this past school year. In talking about those FTE reductions that we projected would happen for the next school year, they really come in three main areas. The first of which is related to our sections and class sizes. Based on the class size ranges that we introduced as part of our staffing assumptions when we introduced open enrollment seats and that discussion in January and February, we knew that there would be some reductions of sections because of the updated class size ranges. We also knew that based on a staffing decision from last summer, that we would have some potential changes in special education. I believe a community member noted at our last board meeting that we had several resignations in the area of special education. That is true. And you may remember that one of our strategies when we were unable to fill special education educational assistant positions this past school year was that if we had two vacant special ed EA positions, that we would replace that with one teaching position because we had more access to hire special education teachers. We did that in a number of places. And because we went with that less preferred staffing model, we had a greater FTE of special education teachers for this year than we need going into next year by implementing our preferred model with Stacy Clem, our director of special education. So a couple of those FTE reductions that we are accomplishing for next year come out of that special education area as a result of that staffing strategy. Based on the experience that we had this year, we have some other thoughts about what our staffing strategy will be if we continue to experience challenges filling those education assistant positions. But we are hopeful that because we're getting such an early start on our staffing, that we will fill even a higher percentage of positions next year than we did this year, which was around 98% of our staffing. The third area that we're experiencing an FTE change is our secondary enrollment in our secondary schools. Longfellow, for instance, has an influx of students. About 30-some students are coming into Longfellow based on the size of the outgoing 8th grade class and the incoming 6th grade class. And West is actually experiencing a decline of students for next year, about 75-ish students. And so we've adjusted FTE at those schools accordingly. Our next steps are manyfold. Right now, I am working with our directors and our principals to go ahead and finalize staffing assignments. For those who are accessing the public version of those staffing plans, right now what's available are really just the assignments and the FTE. Teacher names have not been assigned to all of those components. I expect that to be available later this week to our community. And so right now, in both our staffing plan as well as Skyward, our employee management system, we're updating those staffing assignments and salaries for next year in anticipation of getting contracts and letters of assignment ready to go. Last Friday was the deadline for our specialized program lottery. So for families who were interested in having their students attend WSTEM, USTEM, MSTEM, and Montessori, they had a deadline of Friday to accept those assignments. Once those are updated, our staffing plan will also reflect those acceptances. I believe a couple of our community members noted that the enrollment, for instance, at USTEM, Mr. Abdul-Mal is in the audience tonight, the section sizes are lower than they have been in the past. And that is accurate because they were not updated according to the new students coming in through this year's lottery. We will continue to go ahead and update those enrollments and class sizes with the lotteries. And this week, we're also going to start to take a look at intradistrict open enrollment or intradistrict transfers. This year, with Mr. Pinion and his staff and the People of Family Supports, we'll be taking a close look at those requests and really following closely our class size guidelines to ensure that the process of those intradistrict transfers is not causing us to have to add staffing in that process. And that's different than we've used in the past year. Once intradistrict transfer approvals are finalized, we're going to start looking to our open enrollment decisions. And we need to send out open enrollment letters in the month of June. Again, as a reminder, in case anyone's forgotten, our plan for open enrollment seats this year is that once the interdistrict transfer seats are completed, that we'll look to place open enrollment students in our schools that have the lowest overall enrollment by grade level. There are no seats opened in second grade for next year. And I think that takes me through the highlights of our staffing plan proposal.
Thank you. Questions and comments from the board?
Thank you for this. This was very thorough, all of the documentation, very helpful in understanding the process of what to expect for next year. The only question I have is around instructional supports. So historically, we've talked about only having enough staffing to meet the lowest performing the bottom 10% of performers. Is that changing at all for next year?
It is not.
Okay. And our ultimate goal would be the bottom quartile. Is that what we would hope for? Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Marble affirms that.
Yes.
Dr. Marble, how many more staff members will we need in the Wauwatosa School District to meet the goal of serving the bottom 25 percentile?
We would need to double our current allocation. So we currently have 12 academic specialists at the elementary level. We would need to double that to 24.
Ms. Zelazowski, the average cost of a staff member in that position is how much?
Approximately $100,000 salary and benefits.
I taught social studies, but I think that would be, Mr. Brightman, correct my numbers, that's about $1.2 million extra that we would need to make that happen. Dr. Hood, I appreciate the question. We desperately feel the need to try to help all of our students, and we know that we're unable to do it right now because of the financial restraints that we have in our district.
Thank you.
I know Dr. Jessup Anger brought up the social emotional learning and some of the positions we were able to put in place. I believe some of it with ESSER funds. Correct.
Correct.
Now, are we maintaining those positions? I know I see the operational and instructional support. Are those positions maintained in there? I know they're not explicitly stated.
Yes, this proposal includes maintaining all of the positions that were created as a result of ESSER and the needs that were identified at that time.
We still are seeing those needs.
Those needs have not changed.
Correct. And we have made some, we have been fiscally responsible in the area of, we've been able to adjust our class sizes a little bit, right? To adjust FT a little bit to save money. I mean, I know, we're talking as a district about, the shortfall that we'll be facing, but we have been able to maneuver some things, right, to do some savings in that
Correct.
area.
Yep. So the class size ranges that we presented earlier this year represented a little bit larger span of class sizes. And so in the chart that's included in the presentation, there is a reference to like what this year's class sizes have been and what next year's are. Again, there is a nominal increase. JK has an increase and so the average is going from about 15 and a half students per class on average to about 17 and a half.
I know we've talked about some of our behavioral data. Do we have other data points that support that these SEL roles, because there's some in our community that may not be as supportive as some of these SEL roles, especially as we face this budget shortfall. But I know we've seen obviously some data around our behavioral, but have we even got maybe anecdotal data from teachers about the support that they receive from these specialists?
I can speak to some of the rounding me and my team have done at all of the schools. Part of this was at the end of last year as well into this year. And the anecdotal feedback was overwhelmingly, please do not take these positions away from us. We need them. Students need them. Our families need them.
Great. Thank you.
Ms. Zelazowski, to just follow up, could you give us feedback on how the principals responded to the prospect of the ESSER positions not being available to them?
The social emotional specialist positions are seen as essential to the work of principals, especially as we are continuing to highlight their role as instructional leaders in the organization. There would be many things that would not be as high a priority as those social emotional specialist positions. They're very important to those individuals.
Just to follow up on that, I think this was a great line of questioning because we want to think about value and impact. And I really encourage parents as you're talking or meeting with teachers or going to schools or going to your PTA meetings to hear principal reports to ask them specifically, what is the impact that the SEL staffing has had on your school? Because I think that's how parents are going to realize and wider community members too, not just parents. That's why you're going to realize the value added and the way in which the spending has had. It's not just how much we spend, but it's how we spend, and do we spend towards impacting children's ability to be in the school and to learn in our schools. So I think that it's not just our responsibility, it's not just the district's responsibility to put that out there, although some qualitative data from principals would, I think, be very helpful in the long run, maybe integrate into their reports to the parents. And they do some of that, but I think we could continue to do more of that so people understand that. But just that it's also everyone who is part of the school district, either because you reside in the district or because you attend the schools or have kids in the schools, it's really our responsibility to be asking and learning about that impact that what we've invested in this district has had.
One of the main challenges I see when I think of staffing is just the lack of diversity in staff. And I was just wondering if we have a plan that will help like retain and attract more teachers of color.
Yes, one of our strategic plan priorities is to not only increase employee retention throughout the organization, but to go ahead and continue to diversify our workforce. And really the goal is so that our workforce mirrors our student population. In my experience, really the first step in maintaining a strong and diversified workforce is by helping to make the environment for all of our employees a very positive one and one that they would recommend to their friends and colleagues. And I think we've done many things to move in that direction, and including the topic that we'll talk about in a little bit, which is compensation.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
So the Champions program seems like it's been a really good investment as well this year. Do we feel that, do you feel in looking at the staffing plan that it's going to meet the needs of our district next year?
Yes, in talking, as I do with Mr. Pinion from Pupil and Family Supports, Dr. Marble in Academic Performance, and Mr. Brightman from Finance and Operations, they've recommended levels of staffing in their different areas. And Mr. Pinion is confident that our current staffing level will continue to support our needs.
Thank you all for the conversation. We are then moving into the staff compensation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Katie, for the segue. To use improper English, we can't afford to not continue to invest in our employees in this organization. Double negatives usually really bother me, but they are apropos right now.
UW-Madison?
English. Yep, which is why I know it's a double negative. So I chose to include a slide for you this evening that really talks about the cost of turnover. The costs of turnover are not just related to the time it takes to go ahead and attract and interview and onboard new employees. The costs are really much greater when you think of the expertise and the understanding of systems and processes and alignment of values that you build in staff members in the organization. This graphic comes to us from Forbes, a trusted resource that really talks about, based on the type of position in the organization, how much that turnover cost really is. And I would say that as we've seen our employee retention rate increase over time, it definitely feels different. We are not continuing to have to reinvest in that foundation for all new employees in the organization. And if we are to continue to be successful in our goals for students, we need to continue to retain effective staff members in the organization. And investing in salaries is part of the way we need to continue to do so. We tried it the other way, and it didn't work for us. If we're talking about a Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. Our current salary schedules demonstrate a marked difference from our previous compensation priorities. For those of you who were on the board prior to the approval of the current teacher compensation system, when I was hired in March of 2022, you'll remember and recall that these structures offer a predictable and reliable structure for employees to see the progression of their salary over time. especially in terms of our hourly and support staff schedules. In the past, one of the schedules was 6 steps, one of them was 4, and one of them was 3. They are all now 6-step schedules. Our teacher compensation plan prior to the 2022 approved plan was not accessible to all staff members. It was not transparently understood in terms of who received raises and how much they were, and our current plan is. We are continuing to invest in that structure. We'll talk in a little bit about what those investments have looked like. We talked last year when we started looking at additional investments into our teacher compensation system at where Wauwatosa fell in terms of other CISA 1 districts for comparison salaries. And at that time, we fell at 3rd from the bottom. Mr. Brightman and I continue to go ahead and look for data sources that allow us to have real-time comparisons. This year, we participated in a survey that allowed us to get access to current year data, along with other school districts who voluntarily submitted their data. So it wasn't quite a full data set, but based on what we were able to secure, it appears as if we have surpassed 2 more districts in terms of average teacher daily salary or daily rate after our investment of 12% last year. And so based on, from a numerical value, it looks like we're in the top of the first quartile. So at about 25% of our comparisons. Our goal is to be 100% of our median or at the 50% mark of our comparable salaries for total compensation. This just looks at salary alone. For your information, our investment in teacher salaries since 2002, not including the proposal for you today, has been almost $1 million. I continue to talk with dozens of employees about compensation, not only helping them to understand what our current priorities are in terms of consistently based on years of experience in the organization, but also that employees can feel heard and like we understand where they're coming from. And that certainly is an important component as well. Those conversations with all of our staff members really help to form the ideas or the thoughts about how we can continue to improve our models to come. When we look at our support staff positions, using, again, the same partial data set that we had access to, we're able to go ahead and look at average salaries across some benchmark positions. So for instance, all administrative assistants in one group together, our CISA 1 comparison shows that we're a little bit of ahead of where they are in Wauwatosa. Same for buildings and grounds. We are still lagging a bit when you look at all education assistant positions. That includes special ed and regular ed. That includes student supervisors, health room aides. And then we're a little bit closer. We just go ahead and pull out of that group education assistants for special education. And then we are pretty on par when we look at other library assistants in the CISA 1 area. We're very close. I think it's really important to note that for education assistant positions in particular, not all school districts provide benefits access, health insurance, dental, those types of things for those positions. And so again, not as true for administrative assistants year-round positions, but for those school year positions, we are one of the few that continue to offer benefits. And so that does moderate a little bit the competitiveness of our salary. If we were to look at total compensation, again, we'll be more competitive when we have a full data set in that respect. I would take a minute to go ahead and highlight the multiple components of compensation that we are recommending for the 2004-05 school year. The first is for all staff members, an average of a 4% increase. I would note that with the variety of schedules that we have access to, that and I'm going to go ahead and pull up the draft schedules for us. That not every schedule is based on the same percentage increase from one step or level to the next. So for instance, when we look at our support staff schedules, which I've got up for education assistants on the slideshow, those step increases, again, average to about 2%. So for our support staff positions, the 4% comes out to be their step increase at their anniversary, as well as 2% added to the schedule that's effective July 1. For teachers, the level increases are 3%. So we would give them their level increase and then plus 1% added to their schedule. There are a number of positions that do not have salary schedules. And so those are annual salaries. And so we would look to add 4% to those annual salaries for the positions that there are not schedules for. When we look at retention bonuses for teachers, it was part of the compensation system approved in March of 2022. Reward for longevity for tenure is also very important to our support staff employees. So the proposal for our support staff employees is to go ahead and add in some longevity bonuses. Right now, there's currently a 25-cent per hour bonus for a support staff employee who's been in the district for 15 years. That is specific to administrative assistants. And so we're looking to go ahead and again, make accessible those longevity bonuses to all hourly support staff groups. And we've created a couple of tiers. At 3 years, which has been hard to go ahead and retain our support staff employees for that length of time, is the 25 cents that we see currently for 15 years. Once employees complete 7 years, it would be a 40-cent per hour bonus. For 12 years, 55 cents per hour, and for 20 years, 75 cents per hour. One of the things that I believe strongly in is for our employees to understand how our wage schedules work, and to be authentic in terms of describing how they work and where we're investing money with employees. And so one of the questions that I was asked last week in meeting with a group of staff members is that for employees who are on step 6 of their schedule, or whatever the end step is, step Z or level Z on the teacher schedule, what is their increase? There has to be a top of every schedule unless you keep adding a level or a step on every year. So really staff members across the salary schedules that are at the top, they'll receive the % increase on that level, but there are no more levels at this point. And so that's something that organization we can continue to look at. I would make note that on the teacher salary schedule, for instance, level Z is over $100,000. And that is not true for all school districts having a top teacher salary over $100,000. Our support staff positions are far from that. And we were just lucky to get the 6 steps last year for those schedules. But that is something we want to consider compared to the 26 steps for the teacher schedule. The proposal executive summary that was provided in your board packets does include a financial cost to each of these areas. One of the additional retention opportunities or incentives that I'm proposing that we add for our support staff positions is to provide an additional personal leave day after 5 years of employment. Again, I think it is very important for our staff members to have that flexibility in their time off. We know that's another contributor to retention in the organization. I will also be bringing forward, which does not have a monetary cost, a proposal to go ahead and allocate sick leave for our support staff positions starting on their first workday, as opposed to an accrual after work days. That is less about a financial cost and more about a policy, but that will come forward to you all as well through the policy committee. The additional support staff compensation that I improvement that I am recommending would be the addition of 2 paid holidays for our education assistant positions. Right now, those positions only have 2 paid holidays, and there is a long stretch in the winter of the year where there are many non-working days for those positions, and providing some more income in that time frame. The feedback has been that would be very valuable, and I agree. There are two other, four other areas where I'm recommending compensation and investments for the upcoming school year. One of those is related to the salaries for our technology department staff members. I worked with these staff members over last summer as well as this fall to put together a schedule and get their feedback in terms of whether the schedule itself was meeting their needs. We based and looked at private sector comparables as well as other school district comparables. Looked at the progression of wages that was offered for those positions. And that is included in the proposal as well this evening is the new schedule for those employees. Most recently, I've worked with our recreation department staff members on a new salary schedule. We just reviewed that salary schedule, I think just a couple weeks prior to our spring break. I'm in the process of, I met with Matthew Vanderkamp last week in order to look at how we then would transition current employees onto that schedule. And then I'll be setting up meetings with those employees. But I estimate the transition to that schedule for July 1 to be about $30,000. And we use the same process of looking at comparables, talking about priorities for that group, and then looking at the draft schedules. I mentioned earlier that, and we talked about the value of our social emotional specialist positions in our elementary schools. And I mentioned the increased focus on principals being instructional leaders in their schools. In Wauwatosa, elementary principals have worked 221 days, which is not the same as a full contract, as do those of us as administrators in this room. And so really to support that instructional leadership and to provide time to address all of the things that principals attend to during the year, after having talked with them about what a potential transition could look like, I am recommending that we add 8 additional days to their contracts. We've talked about what that revision looks like. The group is supportive of that change and the transition that I've developed, but it's hard to say that someone is an instructional leader if they're not working year round in the position. And so this proposal also includes increasing those days. And then last but not least, this proposal also includes adjustments for a couple of administrative positions, predominantly our associate principals. Our associate principals are well lagging comparisons in our area. And so the recommendation includes adjusting our high school principals to our level of comparables. It is probably going to be a 2-year investment to bring middle school principals up to that level. They are really lacking comparators locally. And that is our bench for when we have principal and other administrative positions. We have a very talented group of APs and we want to keep them in the organization. And so this proposal also includes those salary adjustments, as well as a couple other administrators who are lagging their peers. Flipping back to the slideshow just for a moment. I was able to go ahead and sketch out, the proposal itself is for just under $2.7 million across all of our 800 plus employees in the organization, 900-ish employees in the organization. And you can see by group what those totals look like. I would note that the 4% average applied to our educational and operational staff group, that is all positions in that group. So it includes support staff, administrators, technology, recreation, in that total. And when we look at the total investment for salaries in the organization, I gave you the total of about 4.5 million since 2002. With next year's investment, we'd be about 7.5 million over 7.5 years. And you saw what we're still looking at for comparables. This is really good work, and there's more investment to be made. I would just make a note that as we get ready for our April 22nd Board of Education meeting, the proposals and the recommendations for compensation would actually come in two separate motions. We have a ratified teachers union in Wauwatosa, and so this year we would actually be asking to approve a collective bargaining agreement with that teachers union, and then separately salary adjustments for our other non-bargaining or non-union employees in the district. And with that, I'd take some questions.
Questions and comments from the board?
I have some questions. It's just in this conversation, it kind of sparked some curiosity, just in retention and folks who work in our districts and decide that they want to move up. So I'm specifically thinking about like our building substitutes or our teachers who are in TOSA tot, right? Like two positions that I've done. And I know that some of those staff members want to then become a full-time part of the district. And I just wonder how we treat them because I don't think that they are considered an employee of the district, correct? Or
So let me clarify. So both are a little bit different. So our building subs are hired by EduStaff, our substitute staffing agency. And so when an individual who works for EduStaff is interested in becoming an employee of the district in a regular position, they do need to apply through We Can. And I would say that there is no better way to demonstrate the quality of your work than to be a sub in our schools where principals and our staff members get a chance to see what you're doing or hear about what you're doing from their kids every day. And so, yes, we do absolutely hire a lot of staff members through EduStaff. Related to individuals working in TOSA TOTS, they actually are our employees because they work through the rec department. So I can think of a couple notable examples just from the past 18 months where we've been able to share a part-time JK teacher with TOSA TOTS, and then as that individual's had interest moving into full-time teaching positions.
so how does the compensation work, I guess, is what I was really thinking about. Like those building subs who have put in a couple years or even the TOSA tots, because I know it's just very part-time.
Yep. So once they come into a teaching position, for instance, then we put them on our teaching schedule. And really, so substitute teaching and just generally in the field does not necessarily equate to like years of experience in teaching from a salary schedule standpoint, but they are eligible to get on the salary schedule in the area of their certification. And then we would apply the analysis of looking at other comparable salaries based on experience like we do for all other positions.
Are they given preference at all when positions are opened? Either position, whether they're a building sub or working for the rec department?
Based on just our hiring practices, there's no formal preference that's provided. But I certainly think, and I know that our principals, having been able to see their work and get feedback from their colleagues, that oftentimes can give them a boost in the process.
And because we don't have rounds like other districts, right? I'm just used to being in districts where there's like round one, and that's where all employees can go for those positions. But they, like in round two, non-employees can't apply. We don't do that, correct? It's open to everyone in BPS. Okay. And have we considered, would it be financially beneficial for us to hire our own building subs, or is that something we've ever explored? Because they are like folks who want to dedicate like the full year to Wauwatosa, and they just don't get the benefits of like getting paid when there's a day off or things like that. So I just wondered if we've ever considered that, and would it be financially prudent to do that?
So one of the benefits of using a provider for our substitute staffing is that relieves the organization of some of the Affordable Care Act requirements for providing benefits, because there's some penalties involved if we don't provide benefits to 95% of our staff members, or if 95% of our staff members, if at least that percentage don't find the cost of our benefits to be affordable. Typically, the cost of public school district benefits substantially exceeds the cost of benefits through a staffing agency. And so while that might be attractive as a recruitment tool, from a financial standpoint, it would be prohibitive to bring those positions in-house.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
So obviously, we're in a difficult financial position. We do have the fund balance for next year. But we want to be really, I think, thoughtful about how we spend our money, where we spend our money. I absolutely believe that teachers should be educators, not just teachers, but educators in general should be paid a salary that is at least at that median level. I think that's a great way of us being able to recruit new staff, retain those staff. But we obviously want to make sure that we're retaining effective staff that are moving the dial with learning, closing those disparity gaps. So can you talk a little bit about how we're currently looking at that, making sure that our educators and our principals are doing that so that those are the right staff to keep on and continue to increase their salary?
Yes. Wauwatosa School District employs for teachers an evaluation system that is part of the STRONG model, and CESA 6 supports our work in that space. So all of our principals, our directors, our academic leaders in the organization are responsible for evaluating and observing staff members every year. This year, actually, we've received some questions and comments because we have more teachers on plans of improvement than we have at least in the last 18 months. And I'm not sure how much longer prior to that. So we've actually had questions from staff members about, how does an employee, what is the process or what are the steps involved in developing an improvement plan for a staff member? And there are a couple of different on-ramps to improvement plans. One is to have more than one observation where performance is not meeting expectations. Another is if there is an employee disciplinary situation that relates back to the teacher performance standards, that we would develop a plan to help someone's performance improve and reach that satisfactory level. And once there is an improvement plan developed for an employee, typically there are supports that are provided by administrators, by Jennifer Foch, who is our Director of Continuous Improvement in the Division of Academic Performance. The process of developing the improvement plan, again, is very much tied to the areas where the teacher is not demonstrating the level of performance that we expect. There's a length of time that is tied to the performance improvement, and then ultimately a decision made whether to continue to the plan, whether it's complete, or whether we are going to part ways because we don't think the employee is able to go ahead and meet our performance standards. And so the way Ms. Foch works with our principals who develop or who identify when there's a concern and a need for an improvement plan. Typically, there's consultation with Ms. Claybor and I to be aware that the improvement plan is being developed. And then at the time when there's going to be an analysis of how the improvement plan was completed or not, then we're involved in whatever the recommendation is for continuing or not with that improvement plan.
May I just add an addendum?
Of course.
So in our school system, we believe that it's about coaching teachers up and not trying to get anyone out. And so that's why we've made such a significant investment in instructional coaches, because we feel that it's important to work alongside teachers as they're growing. There may be cases where teachers need guidance and assistance in building their repertoire and their skills in instructing students. So that's one component. The second is often you hear in the community that we should run the school district like a business. This is probably the closest aspect of running the school district like a business than anything else. It doesn't matter if you're in the construction business, if you are in healthcare or in education, be it higher ed or K-12, it costs to have talent in your organization. Our ability to attract the best staff members is really contingent on our ability to pay them. And we settled in this school district for many years and being in the bottom of our region for paying teachers. There's a consequence to students when we do that type of work. And so I appreciate your slide at the beginning of the presentation of it. If you make the investment in the first place for talent, and then you create an infrastructure where you are coaching them up and supporting them and creating a culture where it's okay. I like to use the terminology, it's okay to fail forward. I would rather have someone fail forward and try their best, and we create an environment where it's okay to fail forward, but at least you're moving forward. That's what we're trying to create here. And then I guess candidly, Dr. Marvel and her team have been working hard to develop an instructional handbook that outlines what are the expectations. I don't think we've ever had those expectations before. And so as you may hear from staff members who will say, well, we've never had this before in the district. And the answer would be absolutely not. You haven't had this type of structure before, but we have heard the message loudly and clearly from our community and from the board that there are higher expectations for our students. And we believe that if we have those structures in place and we have those supports in place, that our kids can do amazing things. I guess the last thing I would just point out for the board and the community to pay attention to what Ms. Zelazowski shared. Ms. Jenny Fox is our director of continuous improvement, and she's in the division of academic performance. In most school districts, the oversight of evaluation rests with human resources. And so it gives this, I think, very pejorative, negative approach of the evaluation means your job is at risk or not. That's not how we approach this. We believe that just like our students, there will be opportunities for people to grow and to evolve and to learn. And sometimes it's going to work out well, and sometimes it isn't going to work out well. If we can create that environment for our teachers and our educators first, we believe that it is a trickle down impact to our students. So I think that nuance of Ms. Foch is actually in the academic performance division and not in human resources just speaks to our value and our commitment to helping people grow. That is not about, again, it's not about getting people out, it's about coaching them up. Because we believe if we create that environment for our staff, then that will impact the classroom. I hope that is an acceptable addendum to your very fine response. So thank you.
Dr. Ryan.
Thank you for the well-prepared and very thoughtful report and the approach that you take to our staff in this district that I think is, very 360, and it's you're thinking through of what people need and why they might want to work in the district. And I hope that's part of what we help people to understand about the ways that we embrace staff and, try to work. But the amount of work you're doing to hear and get feedback, I think is really important. I'm wondering if we have, or if we might find it useful to, at some point, model for the community what we are saving by retaining. I know that's hard to do, but just theoretically, if we knew about how many we've been losing and the kinds of costs that go with that, because we don't often, we spend more time talking about what we're spending on staffing. We don't talk that much about what we're saving on staffing, but I think the pieces that you've been putting in since you arrived has a lot of it has been about saving in our staffing and making it more efficient. And also, we've talked about how we're saving some by making a solid choice around very small incremental change in class sizes, but that's going to really help our district. So just going, not to make more work if it's, somewhat accessible, or if we can think of that going forward, just to help people to see that savings are also part of these expenditures. Like they're embedded in the work of doing this, is that we're also saving by retaining and in-house training our own staff, essentially keeping them hopefully for a long time. That really offsets these costs that we see in terms of the 4% each year. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Brightman, can you speak to if this were passed in whole, so the 2.66 million, how does that affect our budget for next year and our fund balance?
Yeah, so right now in our budget planning, we've done a 4% roll-up on salaries in aggregate as well as benefits in aggregate. So as long as we stay within that 4% total compensation mix, it's within our planning thresholds.
I think, Dr. Hoyt, your question is really important. I'll use the term, our values as an administrative leadership team was one in which we felt it was important to bring to you the full CPI increase of the 4%. It would have been the path of least resistance and the easier path would have been for us to provide you a recommendation that would have been less than the CPI for our staff. But we believe that that's how we've created the problem that we're trying to rectify now. And I think I speak for our entire team. We believe it's really important to send a message to our staff that we believe in them. And that belief starts with advocating for them by having that full CPI presented to you. We built the budget, assuming that it would be the full 4%. As I shared with the board after the biannual budget passed in June of 2023, that we were well positioned to utilize fund balance for the 23-24, this current school year, and the 24-25 budget year. That's our plan. And so we're within those guardrails. This is an opportunity for me to give kudos and proper acknowledgement to our board, finance, and resource committee, who delivered a very, I believe, clear directive to Mr. Brightman and I at our last meeting of stay within the framework. We've told our community that we had a $9.3 million shortfall and that we were going to use fund balance. Don't go outside of that line. That message was delivered, and I think it showed the power of the committee structure as well, that they advocated and spoke up for this entire governing body in that committee meeting. And so we are adhering to those guidelines.
Can you remind me what that leaves us with as at a fund balance at the end of the 24-25 year?
Yeah, so
Yep, okay.
he's going to let his calculator machine get back to you.
So a couple things in summary that I'm hearing. We are going to have a small decrease in total FTE.
Yes.
That is in large part because class sizes are making an incremental increase, a small incremental increase. They are still small.
They are
Class
very
sizes
small.
are very small in Wauwatosa. We are investing in some specific schools that have demonstrated higher need.
Correct.
We have seen success this year with outcomes when we have done that. We're continuing to do that to support those schools and those communities to bring them up to a higher level of performance and support as we move forward. There's some specific compensation and adjustments that we're doing beyond, in addition to the 4% increase, specifically for principals to be able to fulfill the instructional leadership, and then also adjusting several different groups to bring their compensation more in line. Where we've done that with educated teachers, we're doing that with several other groups this period. Those are the kind of the key. That's what I'm hearing is kind of the key functional components. Big picture takeaway is if you don't have to keep hiring staff, you're saving resources, you're getting better as an organization. Key thing is you have to make sure that your staff are exceptional when you're keeping them.
Correct.
And we've got systems in place to be able to address and support that as well. Okay. And the Finance and Operations Committee has set a hard line of do not go over 9
I wouldn't call it a hard line. I think it was just very.
I don't know.
It was delivered with kindness, but also, so I don't want to give that
No,
impression.
I like that.
But no, in all seriousness, it was, I think the community needs to know that we have committee structures in place for that purpose. And the message was clearly delivered and And part of the committee structure is to represent the full board. I think they've done that very well in terms of giving us guidance. And Mr. Brightman, I think you're ready.
I am ready. So we started this year with $35.7 million in our district fund 10 fund balance, with a $7.126 million shortfall for this year's budget approved. We'll end the year with about $28.6 million of fund balance, which is 29.83% or 30%. The benchmark we like to go with is at least 15%. 25% is better, best in class. If we fully utilize the $9.3 million in fund balance for the 24-25 budget cycle, that'll bring us down to $19 million, $19.3 million, which is 19.23% of our next year expenditures. So above that 15, below the 25. And that's why we're saying we're comfortable with one more year. But beyond that, it starts to go down to a level of 8% and then to a zero level. So next year is really the year to either address the expenditure side or the revenue side of the equation, or both.
Okay, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Any final questions from the board? Next item, presentation of the agreement between the Wauwatosa School District and the Wauwatosa Education Association.
So that was part of the overall proposal. We will have a separate recommendation for approval of the collective bargaining agreement at the April 22nd meeting. I'm still not done.
Still in progress.
I'm still not done with, yeah, one more agenda item.
Action to approve the insurance broker.
Yes, yes. I'm sure all of you recall at our March board meeting that we introduced the process that we use to develop a recommendation for our benefits consultant. This evening, I want to start by reiterating why we are recommending USI as our choice for our benefits consultant. USI demonstrated that they have the capacity to provide us with advanced reporting that we can use for better decision-making for our employee benefits. They have a much more set of comprehensive services, not just for my team and human resources, but also for our employees as well, in terms of reaching out and inquiring about any variety of benefits questions. They'll be able to help us in our health and wellness committee develop a long-term strategy for our benefits to help us reach that 100% of median from a total compensation perspective. They have expert guidance in population health management, which are really the strategies that help us on a long-term basis manage our costs. And their deep bench of support for underwriting and analytics to help us manage the plan going forward is second to none. These are some of the resources that we will benefit from as a partner with USI. This evening, I invited our primary consultant on our team, Mr. Scott Fuller, to join us.
Good evening. Great to be here on behalf of USI, my team that will work with the district and myself. We're very excited for the opportunity to work with all of you. And I'm actually very glad I was able to come to this meeting to listen to some of the things that you all have given. I'm just excited to hopefully work with all. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. I also feel really positive about our continued ability to go ahead and continue to take a pulse on where our insurance benefits are. One of the things that I tell my colleagues is I don't really like surprises. I don't think you guys do either. And so as we monitor what our health plan looks like from 1 month to the next or year over year, we'll be able to give you a better sense of the types of adjustments and opportunities that we have with our health plans. I thought this was a great time just to give you an update in terms of how our plan is running this year. We should be getting our March data any day now, but through February with the darker blue bars, you can see that our expenses, our premium equivalents are significantly less than we were paying last year. We are running much better, which was what we intended with the changes that we made. So again, we're continuing to monitor this. I am really pleased with the reinvigorated Health and Wellness Committee and their engagement and commitment to helping us make good decisions as an organization. We are on the right path. We have a lot of work to do to go ahead and bring USI up to speed, as well as get ready for what would be our renewal for the 2024-25 school year. And so I'm really pleased to present to you this evening our recommendation for USI to be our benefits consultant.
The recommendation.
Please do.
It is recommended that the school board approve the insurance broker contract.
May I have a second?
Okay.
Thank you. We're now open for board conversation, discussion, and we'll need to a vote.
I'll stab at it. Ms. Silazowski, in here with the engagement with USI, what does that look like on an annual basis with the services that they'll provide?
Really comprehensive support around the school year. So that would be monthly meetings with Mr. Fuller and his counterpart. I can't help but mention Joe Thompson, who is an amazing resource and asset to Scott's team. We will meet with them monthly, including Nick Bechtel, who is our HR benefits specialist, and members of the finance and operations team. They will be present to help and support long-term strategy development with our health and wellness committee. They will help us in addition to those meetings, but looking at not only what we are projecting our renewals to be, but other strategies to maintain or adjust benefits that help us provide greater quality or greater resources to our staff members at hopefully lesser costs. And really just walking with us every step of the way across our full benefits. We talk a lot about health insurance because it is the main cost of our employee benefits. But there are other things that, as Lynn was mentioning, really contribute to making this a great workplace and meeting the needs of staff members in the organization. USI would be with us every step of the way.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call the roll. Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Round,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Banger says yes. This proposed recommendation passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Elizowski, you've been up there forever. Thank you.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
all of the information and all the work. I know we are looking at the staffing proposal plan really early in the year. And so I'm glad to hear that both will be moving forward towards approval or further conversation, but keep fingers crossed. And then you'll be able to move forward early in hiring as well. So thank you for all your incredible work with you and your team.
Thank you all.
Next up is strategic goal 6 and under operations, our financial audit report.
All right, thank you. This item comes from our Finance and Resources Committee agenda from February. We had the auditor, lead auditor and partner in charge, Mike Sema, come out and do a report out to the committee on the 23 fiscal year end audit. There is an attachment in board docs. It's a 5-page attachment that summarizes the audit process, findings, and results. So we're going to work from that with our discussion tonight. The financial statements are also in board docs, the full financial statements, along with the management letter that is a more detailed outline of the audit process and findings that I'll go through. So the good news is the audit was done with an unmodified, clean audit opinion, meaning that we properly stated, accounted for all material aspects of the financials that we submitted to the auditors for review. As is always the case, we work with our auditors to improve what we do as far as operations. There are always ever-changing requirements with federal and state grants, with compliance, with record keeping, and part of the audit process is not only kind of play gotcha, but also to learn from that and be able to improve our system. So the findings I'll discuss with you are all non-material, and they're really the improvement side of things, not the gotcha side of things that you would expect with a word like findings. There's really 5 areas that were outlined in the report by Mr. Sema. And the first one is, again, that it was unmodified or clean audit opinion, which is always what we want to have when we submit that to our audit team. The second one they had is they had 2 deficiencies in internal control, and I'll go through what those are in more detail, but they're pretty routine. Most districts get those, and I'll explain what those are. They do a single audit, which is anything when you receive federal funds over a certain threshold, they do a single audit, which is a federal funds specific audit. And that one again came out pretty clean. We have one finding there that I'll describe to you, about $1,300 of findings. So nothing major in that regard with that. There were no disagreements with the auditors. We got along well. We submitted all the information they requested on a timely basis. So that's an improvement over a couple of years ago where they had a very tough time getting information out of the district. So that's a good improvement that we have. Everything was given to them kind of on demand. Part of the audit process they do is they request pretty much a boilerplate amount of information, and then they go deeper with things where they either find a question or anything else. So that's the way that audit process works with that. The 5th thing is there was a new GASB pronouncement. GASB is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and they update and put on further requirements as time goes on. And this one had to do with technology subscriptions and agreements. And they want us to do any multi-year agreements and do computed interest and other kind of aspects to that, book the expenditures over a period of years. We didn't have any subscriptions that fit that bill this last round, but we'll be attuned to that if we ever have a multi-year technology subscription that will be enforced with that. But we didn't have one of those for this last year. If you look at the 2nd and 3rd page that's in the attachment board docs, we did have 4, I believe it is, they're called findings, but they're really non-material findings. The first one is labeled 2023-001. This is the one that almost every school district in the state gets, and it's due to the fact that we submit our fund accounting financial year-end results to the auditors. They input that into their software, and they kind of churn out the financial statements that you see in review. We could prepare our own, but the auditors would still prepare their own too. So from an efficiency standpoint, it makes sense to just give them the fund balance statements. They go through the process of then interpreting those and presenting those in the full audited financial statement. But they have to do a disclosure based on that fact that they do the financial statements and then they audit the financial statements. But again, it's all based on our year-end fund accounting, which translates into those statements. The second one is finding 2023-002. This one is really a bookkeeping. I said there were no disagreements. This isn't really a disagreement, but it's kind of an anomaly. When we did the escrow fund for the defeasance, we booked a rebate on interest into a revenue account. So typically, anytime we receive an interest income, we book that as a revenue. So we did that. In this case, it was really an offset to the expenditures of the escrow account defeasance. So it's considered a rebate. So it should be a negative expenditure, which we never do. But in this case, we were supposed to do it that way. So we just rebooked that as a negative expense rather than a revenue. It had no effect on the bottom line, but it was just an accounting change that was kind of an anomaly. So we made notes for future escrows to book it that way.
This is, I believe, our second double negative of the evening.
Yes.
Second double negative. And I have never done a negative expenditure, an allowable negatives, but this is the one case where I can note that it's appropriate. Correct. The third finding is 2023-003. We had a claim for Medicaid reimbursements on a student who we didn't have an M5 on file, which is a medical necessity form that has to be on file. So about $1,300 in costs were claimed against Medicaid and reimbursed that we didn't have that M5 to be able to show the auditors in that situation. So we've worked with our teams to make sure we have a cross check to ensure that we don't do that in future claims. But again, very non-material. The fourth one is 2023-004. This was Simply our staff not documenting a point in time screenshot off of a DPI site that lists a student count on a specific date. I believe it's October 1st, but I may be wrong on that. But because we didn't capture that and you can't go back and recreate that, it's a screenshot at a point in time. They found us had a deficiency with that one. So we will make sure that did make sure that within our process, we take that screenshot and file that in our audit file for future reference. Within that. So we had 4 findings, but again, very nominal in what they were, and we can learn from those and address those. The last 2 pages on the attachment show some financial highlights of the financial statements. You've seen this within our budget approval for this year. So you've seen the fund accounting side. The financial statements take the fund accounting that we're talking about most of the time and translate that into a statement of net assets or a net position. Which isn't real meaningful from a governance standpoint. It's more meaningful if you're a bondholder or an outside entity looking at the overall financial health of our district compared to other districts nationally. It really helps to describe how much infrastructure we have. We kind of talk about deferred maintenance. It doesn't even include those things. It's more of an accounting tool with, are we accruing debt over a longer life than our assets? We're not. So we're in a relatively good position. The last thing that comes into play within an audit preparation is the Wisconsin retirement system, the state pension system, finishes their year end and has to produce either a surplus or deficit position for each district in the state. And that'll go back and forth and swing by $5-10 more million every year, just based on how the investment of the pensions are structured and invested and what they see as far as that snapshot that they have. When you look at our results in the last page of the findings, we had $13.2 million as a positive standpoint from WRS a year ago and a negative $7.7 million this year. That's nothing that we did. That's not a knock against the state pension system. It's all within the mechanics and accounting what they do. That's just a normal ebb and flow, even though it's a big dollar amount in what they do. And so that's why I would say that second set of financial statements isn't as useful for a governance board standpoint. It just doesn't give that big picture as well as the fund accounting does. But nevertheless, it's part of what they report out on. And then as far as budget highlights, you've seen that as part of our budget process. They look at the year-end results of the last fiscal year, make sure again that we accounted for things properly, that we have things structured in the way that both the state and federal government require. And for the most part, we did do that, obviously. So I think that's my report on. Anything else that you want to share from the committee's lens, or that's pretty much what the auditor relayed to the committee also.
Right. Was there anything from our finance and operations team? Questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you all very much. I noticed there's some questions from the community of, do we do an audit as a school?
Let me cover that a little bit. So
Yeah.
the school district has to do an audit every year at every fiscal year end, and it's a thorough financial audit that, again, it starts high level, but they have certain things that they do in different years where they go deeper. And so they do, there's both requirements on the single audit and federal auditing side, as well as the state, the DPI. And so whether they find something that they just question within our internal controls and accounting, or something the state is asking them to look at more focused across the state, or something the federal government is asking for, that's looked at through their lens every year. We're all prescribed, every district in the state, all 421 of us, to report in the same format to DPI, as well as that thing is translated to the federal government in the same format. So they want to make sure that we're reporting the same way that everyone else is. And that's one of the major pieces of that audit. But it's every year. It's an independent third-party audit. It's a district cost of about $30,000. It looks at not only the financials, but also the way we do enrollment counts to make sure we validate those. We didn't have any findings there. I think we had one student with a reconciliation from the September to January count, but in 6,800 students, that's really not a finding either. And so it is a good cross-check into what we do to make sure that we're doing our due diligence, and it's a third-party report out to the board and community. They're hired by the board. They're not hired by us. So they would report out anything that they did find that would be an adverse type of finding.
Thank you.
I think Mr. Brightman's being very modest. Him and his team have done a really good job in preparing and working with the auditors. the process of the auditors coming in, they swoop into the district. And they take office space and they look at all the records. And this is an annual situation. And as Mr. Brightman also noted, our third Friday count numbers are also audited. So there's oversight to our financial operation when there are people in the community who will say we're irresponsible or things are not well. There's a third party organization that doesn't work in conjunction with Mr. Brightman. They come in and they direct Mr. Brightman and his team on what information they want, and they look at how we stack up in terms of how we operate as a district. And so this audit report is a very important marker, we believe, for the community to know if we're doing well financially or not. There's some districts who don't have clean reports. There are districts who are told through the auditor they have a lot of internal control issues that they need to fix. So I think this is I think Mr. Brightman and his team are being modest. This is a good story to tell, and I hope the community recognizes that we are doing well and are well positioned financially.
Yeah, so we get the comment quite a bit in the business office. Our summers must be pretty light, right? Everyone's out of school, but the audits are in June and August. So it's 3 days on site for the preliminary audit in June and then another 4 or 5 days in August. And all that takes a lot of ramp and prep work and year-end accounting and things. So that is actually our busy season, even though it's counterintuitive to the school calendar.
So thank you, Mr. Brightman, for good work.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to board governance. Action to appoint an expulsion hearing panel and alternate to the end of August 2024. The board may recall, we appointed originally for the first half of the academic year an expulsion panel when we adopted that model. 3 individuals have been serving on that with an alternate, and all individuals have agreed to continue on through the rest of this the calendar year to bring us up to August. In August, we will again do additional appointments. For the board's understanding, we will also be having a board reorganization meeting in about a month. So at our next board meeting, we'll have an in-service when we'll talk about different roles and responsibilities, committees, what's happening, what are folks doing, each of the officer roles, as well as other committee assignments and opportunities for engagement. So if you're sitting as an appointee on something, from anywhere from our kind of CISA representative to different committees, take a couple notes. And get ready to kind of share a little bit about your experiences and some things you're working on. Some people may want to continue on what they're doing. Some people may want to transition to something else. And we'll have an opportunity to discuss all that and kind of make our plans for where we'll be individually and collectively spending our time in the coming year. For this appointee appointments, Dr. Worley will be reading out the recommendation, but Jessica Willis, Liz Heimer-Rolland, Phil Morris will be serving as the primary members of the expulsion committee, and Jenny Hoig will be serving as the alternate. And I believe that is exactly as it was first semester. So thank you. Dr. Worley.
It is recommended that the school board appoint an expulsion hearing panel consisting of the following board members: Philip Morris, Liz Heimer-Rolland, Jess Willis. I had to look at my notes. And as an alternate, Michael, Jenny Hoog.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any board discussion or comments on this item?
Well, I was just laughing because the name tag, so you guys give me a hard time here.
Where is mine?
Oh, you're president.
You swear you were last time. Sorry to interrupt. I just suddenly realized.
So you don't have one, Eric?
That's
Sorry for the distraction.
Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis.
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer-Rolland,
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Anger is a yes. Thank you all very much for continuing to serve in this way. We are next up to second reading into our action to approve policies. We have a couple of policies that we're going to take action on, and then several policies that we've got first readings on. Big thank you to Policy Committee, Dr. Means for the summary. As board members, if you want to take a look before we get into our first readings, I'll pause a couple minutes to give folks an opportunity to look at their notes. If you've got anything to bring up for any of those, we'll move through them. I like to move through them pretty quickly. We'll pause at anything where we need to have bigger discussion. But I know the Policy Committee has worked carefully through these. And if board members have anything you want to dig into anything specific, but there's so many, I don't feel the need to necessarily go through each one. So we'll pause a little bit after we take action on a few of these in the first. So the first one is this second reading and or action to approve policy 8666, transportation by private vehicle. Mr. Morse.
It is recommended that the school board approve policy 8660, transportation by private vehicle, and I so move.
May I have a second on this item?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments on this from the policy committee?
Just that the change is in the document we gave out was to use the very excellent student board member suggestion that the age be 21, not 18, for the driving.
Any other board comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer-Rollins,
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Banger is yes, and that policy update passes. The next is the second reading and or action to approve policy 0167.8, board member participation in meetings via technology. Dr. Hoig, can you read this one?
Yes. It is recommended that the school board approve policy 0167.8, board member participation in meetings via technology, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments from our policy committee on this?
Again, we basically updated to what was requested, which is to remove the word business day. This has to do with when our timeline is by which we have to do something. And also removed the no later than 1 p.m. on the business day. Just as asked. Make it a little bit more easier for people to use those opportunities.
Any other board comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Hoig,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Heimer-Rollins,
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Banger is a yes, and this policy passes. I want to give folks minutes, maybe 2-3 minutes. If you want more, we can have it. To take a look. The summary may be particularly beneficial to take a look at of all the policies, but this will be the first reading of policies, and there's a lot of them. There was a summary document that everyone should have received that does a nice overview of what each of the changes are. So I'm going to pause a little bit, give folks a little bit of time to make sure that they've got that up and get a chance to take a look at any notes you might have. Give me a thumbs up if you feel ready to move forward. I think I see all thumbs up. Dr. Worley, I will kick it over to you. And I think,
Yes.
Okay, so we'll go to, we're gonna start with the 88,000 series, order that's kind of that's on the agenda. The first one, 8309, I think the most important piece to understand about this is that this is legal's request, and it relates to a Supreme Court vote in what's called the Appleton case. So this was brought to us to take care of that. If there's anything else that you see in this that you would like to see changed or said differently, but the redlining itself comes from legal.
seeing none, let's move to the next.
So 0142.1. Anything on that these are now bylaws when we're in the zeros. We're in the bylaws series, so that's our work as a board.
I see a lot of these policies were just consolidated, right, into one greater policy, like all the policies that have to do with our meetings, correct?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, and that was that was something that was recommended by Neola, and then taking out some of the items that, the ones that we didn't need as a result of that.
And that was most of our bylaws, I think, for the meeting.
The only bylaw of any of the changes I had is I was not here for the conversation. If you can share board member ethics, kind of where that goes, and that policy is set to be rescinded.
It's assumed in like the code of conduct.
Yeah, that was, I think, the same
Board
question.
ethics. Code of conduct, there was like another much bigger document. A broader policy. I don't remember.
Being rescinded because it's located elsewhere.
That's my guess.
Yes, because then it becomes duplicative.
Understood. So that's what I had a hazy recollection of that, but wanted to make sure I asked the question. Otherwise, I had no other questions about any of the bylaws. Anyone else?
Right, so we'll go on to the 9,000 series. These are super exciting. I hope you all were kept awake by reading through these. Important. I didn't say they were important. I just wanted to know how exciting they are. There were a couple I think that you might have found interesting, but any questions or comments?
I'd like to ask a comment about 9150 school visitors. It says that it is encouraged and welcomed by the board for parents and other adults in the community to participate. And I know this has been brought up by the greater community, just about, having more access to our schools, whether it's some retired community members who want to come in and participate as like reading tutors to kids, or, maybe be a lunch buddy or something like that. Is that left kind of to the discretion of the individual principal to facilitate those things? Like, how would one go about Because I feel like there is this kind of, especially as we started talking about closing elementary schools, it seems like there's a disconnect between some of the greater community that they don't see what's going on in the school. So how can we kind of foster that? Is that left to the principal's discretion?
It's left to the principal's discretion at this time. Without a true community, family liaison that can facilitate those types of things, it's difficult. In many school districts our size or larger, there's someone who coordinates and works with the senior citizens and works with service and civic groups to encourage that type of engagement. And so right now it is left in the hands of principals to be the main coordinator of that type of work. They lean heavily on their PTAs and PTOs and PTSAs to try to help facilitate it, and or a very active, organized teacher.
Yes,
So-
I work for MPS, but we have our own family liaison in the building. And I just think, the PTA does a great job at I think that outreach for families that have active students who are in the district, but I think that there's maybe an opportunity to engage some of the other community members in a really positive way.
I agree. I'm annually envious of the state's largest school district every year during the MLK Day, and there's so many businesses and organizations that give service back. That just doesn't happen by happenstance. There are individuals who are facilitating it, and often it isn't the principal who's the person who's facilitating that work. It creates a nice, to your point, as well as a nice bridge for the community to see what's happening in schools. But right now, we lack that type of coordination.
And just also speaking anecdotally, I mean, I've heard from some, community members, parents and family members, mostly that they don't necessarily feel welcome either, when they step into the secondary buildings specifically, and just fostering that partnership, I mean, I think is really crucial. And of course, things changed dramatically during COVID, but hoping that we can kind of get back to that, that access that our community and families have to our school buildings. So we have a thorough background on this. There's no doubt about that. But I think just ensuring that we really, lift up that partnership. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Anything else from the 9,000s? Policy committee colleagues, anything else?
Well, I guess if there's any thoughts about this process that was used this time, and I want to, actually shine the light on Dr. Means for really bringing up how, giving that communication to us that board members were hoping they get a little bit more guidance.
Shout out to Ms. Heimer Rollin. I think a few meetings ago, you kind of said, this is what you needed. So I hope this is all.
This is reflected back. Did this do what you needed to? It's good feedback because we already get to see it multiple times and have the discussion, and you all aren't there. So to hear some of that.
Yeah, thank you for the work that the policy committee has been doing, and Dr. Means, that document that was sent this weekend was super helpful. And you guys are doing the hard work behind that document. So thank you for all of your work too.
And just a reminder, the first reads will come back. If, at this point, if without changes, we've typically been putting them on consent agendas. But if something comes up between now and the time that we meet next, which is the 22nd, please don't hesitate to reach out to Dr. Means and let him know that so that we can make sure we get the policies where we need them to be.
I have one final comment. As I was looking over some of them, are we because I know when I worked on the policy committee, Neola was doing a really good job at moving towards more inclusive language. And I just see relations with parents, and I know of students who live with their grandparents or their guardians. So I wonder just about changing certain things like that to be more inclusive.
We've been trying to change the word guardian when it comes up. So if you see one.
So there's a policy like relations with parents.
Okay.
And parents have mentioned a number of times in that policy alone, but it's 9250.
Okay, that's something that Mr. Pinion has been wanting us to do as well. So I think we should note that for our next meeting. We'll look at, we can also just ask that I think the capacity to search these policies as we go for the word parent and make sure we're using guardian is really good feedback. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, we can move towards adjournment. Quick shout out to the ABSI teams that are headed off to Washington DC, I believe before dawn on Friday. Thursday.
Wes is leaving Thursday.
They like to prepare. Say
West is leaving Thursday, East is leaving Friday.
getting the sleep in and preparing.
Best of luck to everyone. I hope all goes well. It is 7:40 PM. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Dr. Boyd,
Yes.
Ms. Willis,
Yes.
Dr. Worley,
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Rowland,
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Anger is a yes, and at 7:40 we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.